So, what does Canvas Christian Church mean to Sandy and myself? It means so much, and we're so blessed to be here. We have a pastor that is compassionate about bringing as many people as possible to God's kingdom, and a leadership team that is willing to listen to God and step out in faith. Faith was just a word to me in my earlier years, I must admit. But there were a couple of events that convinced me just how important faith is. It is more than just a word. We witnessed faith when our daughter and son-in-law lost their home in Florida along with their savings. They had a comfortable life in Georgia. Our daughter was a stay-at-home mom. Our son-in-law was offered a position in a family business in Florida, and they moved to Florida to take on that opportunity. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but they didn't dwell on the decision or the outcome. They decided to give everything to God. Consequently, they moved back to Georgia and started all over again. God has rewarded their faithfulness. I'm pleased to report that both our daughter and son-in-law have great jobs, and our 3 grandsons are growing up in a Christian home. And yes, they tithe. They didn't give up. They had faith that God would provide. I watched God in action when the leadership team made the decision to put the Sawney property up for sale. They decided to put it in God's hands. Within days of putting it on the market, there was a knock on the door. Horizon Christian Academy had been praying that God would lead them to a property that would fit their needs. It seemed like a marriage made in heaven. Then God led us to our Brownsbridge property and has guided us over the last year and a half during our transition time. Have faith and He will provide. That is something we all need to remember. I'm so thankful that I grew up in a Christian home. My parents introduced me to church at a very young age. I remember my mother giving me money each week to give to the church, and we did the exact same thing with our kids. As Sandy and I grew spiritually, we became more involved with our church. And when we finally realized that everything that we have was from God, we began tithing 10% on a regular basis. It is much more daunting now that I am semi-retired. How far are our savings going to go? How will our investment portfolio perform? Will we have enough in our old age so we don't have to burden our kids? That's where faith really comes in. And Sandy and I do have faith that God will provide, so we continue to tithe 10%. But now we're stepping out in faith even further. Sacrificial giving. Sandy and I have decided to give back a significant portion of the part-time business administrator's salary that God has blessed us with. We are also going to cut back on our planned 50th wedding anniversary vacation. We're talking about saving lives here, so that one really is a no-brainer. We're going to give a good portion of our total campaign pledge up front to help with the early campaign expenses that will be incurred, with the goal of expediting our expansion process. We are commissioned to bring as many people as possible to His kingdom. That is why our leadership team has decided to expand our current facility in the first place. Sandy and I are all in. We're ready to follow God's vision in faith for our church, God's church, to begin our expansion project for the furtherance of God's kingdom.